Hello everyone, and welcome to the Prince Magnum channel where hot rodding and romance do coexist. I'm your host, Prince Magnum. Welcome to Surviving Romance, and welcome to our very first bread episode. This is kind of a mini-series that we're going to be diving into. A lot of you are familiar with me doing homemade bread in live streams, and it's a lot of fun. But the problem is, in live streams, that would take way too long to explain in a live stream, and trying to explain it in live streams, it doesn't work. So I got the idea that I needed to kind of sit down and actually do a real bread episode, kind of from start to finish. And we're going to do several versions of the same thing. Basically, just kind of expect where we'll be changing out ingredients and doing different processes, and different things like that. So you guys will see how, basically how you can get the same thing, different results, different flavors, different textures. So that's kind of where we stand, and I guess you could say this is kind of the beginning of a mini-series. So let's get underway. So just expect moments where we will transition full time and space, just like your typical cooking videos that you would even see on television. Alright folks, change a camera angle, but it'll start making sense soon enough. I have here my metal mixing bowl. Now we're going to use, this is as simple as it gets for homemade bread, okay? Now, bread flour, I found, is the best for making bread, but sometimes it's hard to get bread flour, so all-purpose flour does an amazing job. I have a total of 16 ounces by weight. If you haven't got one, get one of these. Get a digital scale. It allows you to switch between, standard, U.S. measurements, and it also works metric. It has what is known as a tare function. Basically, you set a bowl on here or whatever you're using to measure, and you can zero out that vessel, and then you can get an accurate weight otherwise. These are usually ridiculously cheap, and I suggest any of you out there, if you plan on doing any baking, get yourself one. Alrighty, so now that I've said that, as I was starting to say, 16 ounces of all-purpose flour. We're going to add that to the work bowl. Alright, we won't need this anymore. Get that out of the way. So 16 ounces of all-purpose flour. Next, we are going to need 2 teaspoons of salt. Okay, 2 teaspoons. Not tablespoons, teaspoons. 2 teaspoons of salt. Now, I know there's some people out there, some salt phobes that are, that immediately get kind of, like, oh, salt. Bread without salt tastes dead, okay? So, just get that out of your head, alright? Bread without salt tastes dead. So, 2 tablespoons, and in this case, I'm using, pink Himalayan. You can change out your salts. I will say that I'm not a huge fan of table salt, but we've talked about that in other videos. Now, from here, we also need some active, or some basically dry, active dry yeast or rapid rise yeast. The two terms get interchanged, but this is what I use. I've got 1 teaspoon or 1 envelope of that, and real quick, before I just go dumping that in there willy-nilly, I'm going to actually stir around the flour and salt, and more on that later. In goes our yeast. Now that I've done that, I'm going to give a grand total of 3 good-sized squeezes of honey. One, 2, and 3. Now, and then 10 ounces by weight of filtered water. And when I say filtered water, I basically ran it through a pitcher that has water, that has a filter in it, and then, that's what I did. You can buy it, but honestly, why? Now, to start off with, I always kind of start off where I mix it with a silicone spatula. I've tried it with, with a whisk, and I was never, ever happy with that. Now, this, let me also give the tip right now. This gets you started on your dough. Everything that I just did gets you started. You might have to add a little bit of flour. You might have to add a little bit of water, but this is just to get you your start. We're dealing with a lot of agricultural product, and it's hard to say what you're going to need, but this gets you in the ballpark area for a good start. And there it is. Now from here, you can kind of knead it together, which is exactly what we're going to do. And because it's inside the work bowl and you're kneading it by hand, it doesn't have to move anywhere. So let's get that out of our way. Rubber gloves would be a big help right about now. Again, you might have to add a little bit of flour, which I kind of need to. But again, this just gets you in the ballpark area. And if you were smart, you'd kept it on hand. Unlike some of us. Don't force it to take anything the dough ball doesn't want. Don't be that guy. Alright folks, it doesn't look like much, but from here, what we're going to do is we're going to stash this in the refrigerator for a grand total of 10 to 12 hours. Now I know that sounds a little unusual, but in just a moment, we're going to actually explain why we do that. What does our bread and one of the best local pizzerias in your town have in common? Time. Time, my friends. When I said in the last clip that we were going to stash our dough ball into the refrigerator, I know immediately there was a great deal many of you out there that was like, why do that? Well, at your local pizzerias, the really good ones, most of the dough that you will, most of the pizza that you got, the thick crust, the really good stuff, they made that dough the day before. And what they'll do is they'll make up the dough ball for, individual pizzas, and then those dough balls will be put into a great big giant walk-in refrigerator where they'll sit overnight. And then the next day, through these highly regulated, walk-in refrigerators, yes, the dough will rise, but it will rise very slowly. This is done So the water in the flour has time to kind of, the flour has time to really hydrate, making an even better tasting crust when you get your pizza. Well, the same principles will apply in this case to our bread. By giving it that 10 to 12 hour time in the refrigerator to allow for the dough, basically to allow for the dough to take in all that moisture, to truly hydrate, to make it the best possible bread that you can ever possibly make, that it's time. Now, I know a lot of old recipes that say, do this, and you mix it all together, and then you give it, you leave it out on the counter with a towel over it, and then ta-da, there it is. In an hour or two, you've got a risen dough ball. And that bread tastes fine. It's good if you're in a hurry, and if you're making a lot of it, it's great for that. And that particular recipe goes back hundreds of years. But because of modern refrigeration, we can make our that old world recipe even better. Now, something else I mentioned also in the previous clip. Y'all noticed I stirred around the flour and the salt together. Well, by just dumping it, the yeast in there, just kind of, again, as I said, willy-nilly, just dumping it in there. I don't know if anyone's ever really worried about it that much, but to be honest with you, it just makes sense because too much salt can kill yeast. So the yeast landing on top of it, I didn't want to take a chance in possibly harming the yeast before we were ready to throw the yeast in, basically this yeast ball into the oven and then kill it off. That's just, I know that sounds really horrible, but you guys get the general idea. Also, I know some people, will say to do this with warm water, and that's perfectly fine, but make sure that your water temperature doesn't exceed a certain, it's like, be sure it doesn't exceed more than, say, body temperature, because if it exceeds more than body temperature, it could kill your yeast, and then your dough won't rise. These are just little tips that, you're just going to kind of need to know from this point on. So if you're going to attempt this at home, again, just bear these tips in mind, and there's tons and tons of recipe books out there that will probably do 1,000 times better than I will do in this recipe, but just bear in mind, if you have the time to allow your dough to sit in the refrigerator, yes, it takes longer to rise, but again, we're talking, it just creates a much better bread. And I will also say that this is also a kind of, the recipe you're seeing right now at this point is a variation of the one that Alton Brown did from his cooking show, Good Eats. But I've yacked on long enough. Let's get back to actual bread making. Alright folks, I've got my work bowl here, and add a little bit of flour to the top of this, and you can definitely tell our dough ball is starting to look like something. Now we're going to go ahead and just work it inside this bowl right here. Anywhere for 2 to 3, 5 minutes, all the way up to 10 wouldn't even hurt it. But then from there we're going to transfer it to a different work bowl, and then we're going to get a little unorthodox. Kind of bear with me on this one. And because of the cold, this dough ball is very stiff. It's going to be very tough to work with. But don't worry about all that. Just keep working with it. It'll loosen up as the temperature goes up. again, as you're working it, you might find sticky spots, where it's just, a little too sticky. Don't worry about that. Just take and add a little bit more flour. Don't force it, okay? The dough ball knows what it needs, so don't force it. Pretty happy with that. From here, we're going to go ahead and grab that new work bowl, as I mentioned earlier. Doesn't matter the size. And we're going to take a little bit of cold pressed olive oil, or you can use vegetable oil, just pretty much any cooking oil. Add a little bit on. Don't go crazy. Kind of work that in a little bit too. Just a little bit. Don't have to go crazy with it. Now, we're going to cut away, and we're going to do the next unorthodox part. Alright folks, in this particular segment, what we have done is I took our electric kettle that's sitting right here, filled it up with hot water. Well, filled it up with water, got it good and hot, and then, till it was bubbling, and then took our dough ball, set it in here. This is obviously not a hot oven, okay? But I set the dough ball in here with no heat, and then in the bottom, right here, I added in the hot water to this baking dish. Now the steam will then kind of loosen everything up, kind of really bring things alive, and we'll get a good rise. Now, you're going to have to do this twice, this time and one more time. So a grand total of 2 hours. At the end of the first hour, you're going to come back, replenish the hot water, and let the steam do its thing. Then, in a little bit, we'll come back and we'll pull it out, and you'll see exactly what we get. Alright folks, you can see that our our dough ball has really grown. That's the rise that we wanted to see. The texture is going to be absolutely amazing. So let's go ahead and turn it out, just like that. That's going to be a little sticky. So right away, like I said, you guys will notice that it's massive. It's massive. Alright, so we're going to come over and we're going to grab a little bit of all-purpose flour again, and we're going to kind of dust down the work area a little bit along with the dough ball itself. This is also why that I put this out, is to kind of help keep from making a ginormous mess. Okay, Again, we're back to, we're back to kneading. Now, this is oftentimes referred to as the punch down part of bread making. I don't like that term because you're not actually going to punch it down. You're going to fold, think tri-fold wallet, if you will, or just kind of fold it over on itself. And you're just redistributing the air, okay? Food doesn't like violence. How many times y'all heard me say that here on the channel? Food doesn't like violence. So we're going to just kind of turn it over, redistribute. The air. You might hear some popping, but that's perfectly okay. We'll go for a couple minutes. You'll notice that the mat that I laid down will really help with cleanup later. This is definitely the time that I start turning it over in on itself, kind of tightening up that skin, giving it that look that a lot of you are familiar with from the live stream. Okay, just like that. Now, this is the part where a lot of people are going to be super familiar with, is what is oftentimes called the bench proof. Now, I kind of mush it down in there, let it spread out. And from here, it's going to rise again. We're going to give it about an hour. So set your timer for an hour, not a minute less. And this will rise like dramatically. You'd be surprised how much this will rise in a short amount of time. But you're going to leave this out on a counter. You can put a tea towel over it, whatever you need to. And this is a non-stick pan. If your loaf pan is not non-stick, like this one, be sure to lube it up with some sort of oil or butter. Butter is one that's been used for years. So that's pretty much it. And when we come back, which I'll probably leave the camera run so you can kind of see the rise happen, but depending on the temperature outside and everything will also depend on how much it rises once again. Also, this is also about the time that you also want to begin preheating your oven, or at least, depending on your oven, you want to start preheating it to about 400 degrees. Since this oven doesn't take super long, you're going to I'll start about a half an hour in. So, 400 degrees is what you're going to be shooting for. We want an internal temperature of about 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Carryover will take it the rest of the way. If you go past, I would say, about 220 degrees Fahrenheit on an internal temperature with this, carryover will take it over and the bread will become tough. So that's not what we're shooting for. Also, we did not take out the pan of hot water. We're going to need that later during the baking process with this bread. Basically, it'll provide moisture to the bread itself, and it'll give it a nicer texture there at the end. So leave that pan of hot water in the oven, even during the preheat of the oven and everything else. So just leave that there. There is our bench proof. You can see that basically the dough ball has risen once again, and it looks amazing. So the oven is now preheated, and we're going to get to bouncing this in. Alright folks, we're now at that stage. Again, as I said in the previous clip, the oven is preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm now going to set my timer over here for 50 minutes, alright? And at the end of the 50 minutes, I'm going to come back, check on it, make sure everything looks good. If I'm happy with it, we're going to go ahead and run with that. But don't think that the moment this comes out of the oven that we're done. We got a little bit more left to do, and then we get to enjoy it. So, alright, so I'm going to set this right in. Watch out for the steam. It's going to really blast you. Be very careful. And if you're like me and you wear glasses, just expect that the moment you open that oven, you're going to get hit in the face with a big blast of steam. We're going to top that off a little bit more. Make sure everything looks good. I'm pretty happy with that. Be very careful sliding this back in. And there we go. 15 minutes. Keep an eye on this. Occasionally check it. If you've got an oven light, that's even better. So now is the time you want to use it, because if the top starts getting a little too dark, you want to get it out of the oven and check that internal temperature. And of course, you can use, obviously, some sort of probe thermometer, or you could use the old toothpick test, which that's what we're going to do for those of you who may not have a probe thermometer handy. Alright folks, I went ahead and checked in on our bread. It looks good. Pretty happy with the color on the top, but is it done? Is it done? Well, let's go ahead and pull this out. Now remember, our pan of water is still inside the oven, so we've got to be extra careful. So open it up, face away, and let's pull our bread out. We're going to set it right there on the cooktop. We're going to take a toothpick that I conveniently had sitting there waiting. Typical. We're going to insert. And I don't see any crumbs, so this is done. We're going to stop the timer just short of about 6.5 minutes. All right. Now we're not done yet. I have conveniently, again, basically a half sheet pan with a cooling rack set on top. We're going to turn the bread out just like that. We're going to turn it over, and now it's got to sit for a grand total of a half an hour before we cut into this. So we're going to set our timer once again for 30 minutes. And we're going to start that now. Okay? Now I'm going to come over here and turn off the oven. Now there is a pan of water still in there. Don't touch that pan. Leave that pan where it is. Don't bother with it until, believe it or not, until it's cooled off. If you try to grab it now, you could take a chance in burning yourself, and burns are not exactly what I would call a good time. So, in half an hour, we'll cut into this and enjoy basically freshly baked bread. Alright, so we're now at that stage. Time for a taste test. So, I've got something like butter.
I think it's just margarine.
Get yourself some good butter.
Yeah, I got that to make grilled cheese sandwiches. I got tired of waiting for butter to warm up.
Alright. Now some people don't like the crust, regardless.
Myself included. Wait.
Go for it. What are you waiting on me for?
You should wait. It would probably be better.
Me, I don't care. I'm going to eat the whole dang thing. I'm just going to go hog wild. Alrighty, here we go. Well, what do you think?
Thank you.
There you have it. Another episode showing how to make good food. And there's all sorts of things you can make with this. Instead of making up your usual biscuits and gravy, cut out the biscuits and use homemade bread. By all means, it's actually really good. Something we've actually done in a live stream. Along with that, garlic toast, homemade garlic toast. For your pasta dinner, copy that. Cheese toast, a few minutes under the broiler with some shredded cheddar cheese, can't beat it. So, there you have it. Homemade bread, easy to make, on the cheap, and it's as simple as falling off a log. So, that brings us to our usual spot. And that spot is, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to smash the like button. If you're not subscribed, you're missing out. Hit the subscription button and ding that bell so you'll be notified every time we go live or upload a brand new video. Along with that, get out there and work on a project. I don't care what it is, just do something with yourself. Remember, idle hands and a creative mind go together like oil and water. If you have a sweetheart, sweep them off their feet and do something special for them today. And as always, for all of you out there, no one out there has told any of you that they love you today. Prince Magnum does. God bless you, and have a happy 24. Thank you.
Sayer, 6.22 with an over 116 miles an hour, and right now, good time to get a hot dog all the way for camp.